Morning, how are you? Me too. Beautiful day, isn't it? Huh? 85, I think, or somewhere pretty. 178. That's where we stopped. Billy, can you lead us in a word of prayer before we start? Can you lead us in a word of prayer before we start? Yes, sir. Amen. Y'all may wonder what I got this ugly boot on my foot for. I got tendonitis, but the boot has definitely helped it. It has. We're at 178 in our curriculum or our guide, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of things unfolding here to go back and review. We've already had Jesus passed around to everybody. Neither one of the rulers wants to do that task. They're typical politicians. They don't want to go against the people either way. They're kind of caught in the hot spot. So Barabbas is already, Pilate says, "I'll wash my hands." He turned Barabbas over to him. So now he gave them to him. Roman soldiers have got him in something called a fancy word for where I worked was the lieutenant's office was a praetorium. They call it kind of a hallway where we all got together with a prisoner and decided, well, what are we going to do? We're going to take him to special housing unit. We're going to put him in open population. And what are we going to do with him? So here's where we are in the story. We're in Matthew 27. I'll be switching back and forth out of each versions today because they're handy for me. I won't be here the next couple of weeks. Jay will be filling in for me, and then I'll get back and finish this up. We're going to hopefully we'll get a long ways with it today. But anyway, we're starting in verse 27 of chapter 27. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus in the praetorium, or a hallway, or an office, to lack of a better word, and gathered the whole garrison around him. So let's look at this story. Jesus is like the quarterback in the middle of these old-timey huddles where they put a circle around him, but they didn't treat him like the players did. They're circling the wagons around him, basically. I want you to get that picture in your mind before we move on any further. 28 says they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, which is purple. James got up here and gave a very good illustration of all this about 2 or 3 months ago, or maybe longer than that. Time goes by fast. And when they had planted the crown of thorns, and they had put it on his head, and a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and they took the reed and smote him on the head. And after that they had mocked him, and they took the robe off of him, and put on his own raiment back on him, and led him away to be crucified. Anybody want to talk about this situation? Any at all? What were they trying to do? They were trying to demean him at every cost, wasn't it? Exactly. They were not only physical but mentally. How would you like it how are you going to feel if everybody there is around you in a circle, for lack of a better, heckling you in a very mean way? They wasn't laughing with him, they were laughing at him, and they was also trying to hurt him. We all know that. Exactly. Bill, you make an excellent point. How much more could they do? He's sitting there naked and they're beating him. Isn't this the way this goes with a typical situation today where when we get mad at somebody or we think somebody, we need to, I'm just kind of thinking out of the box here. When we get mad at somebody we think is, and this is not the situation, they were all ganging up because they thought he was trying to say he was God, basically. And in some of the back of their minds, they're saying, well, what if he really is? But they went along with the crowd. Isn't this another example to teach us not to go along with the crowd? But if you hadn't, something might have happened to you. Peter was already scared of this. So there's a lot of things going on. But now they've led him away. So this is part of the process. So they led him away, and they're getting ready to crucify him. Now, I've read Bill O'Reilly's book, and really he gives a pretty good depiction of this situation. What you got going on here is a lot of festivals and feasts, and then you got these Roman soldiers. I don't know where he got his information at. He said they really prepared baiting big meals because it was going to be a long process this day. Crucifying somebody was hard work for these soldiers. And they were physically fit, big, robust. And of course, were they crucifying two more on this day besides him up there? So if you believe it or not, there was a lot of, from what I've studied on it, Bible, there's a lot of work to this process to make a point. Okay, we're moving on in verse 32, chapter 27.
You know, Michael,
Go ahead.
Even though he was being persecuted and he was in dire pain on that cross, at the same time, he still had compassion on that other prisoner right there beside him.
He did. And what else did he have compassion on? The people that were doing it to him.
Yeah, that's right.
So is this,
We're told in the other few scriptures we're going to be persecuted too, just like Jesus was.
and even we were quick to jump. Look, nobody, man or woman, wants to be seen as a wimp. Well, are you going to take that from him? Are you going to take that from her? Have you ever had somebody tell you that? And here we go to the cliche, and I'm not, what would Jesus do? No, it's what, and this just hit my mind. What would Jesus want you to do? Not what would Jesus want you to do? I think it's a little bit better than that. Am I telling you that Michael Rainey does that? No, I'm not, because it's awful hard when somebody has done you wrong. And he put up with this. He could have got out of it at any time. And like Billy and Kenneth, what more humiliating would it be to jerk all your clothes off and do this and have it done?
He wouldn't have done the mission that
He knew it all had to play out.
he agreed to do, and God wanted him to do.
Okay, in 32, I'm reading from the New King James. It says, the king on the cross. Now as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled him to bear his cross. Okay. Somebody elaborate on that word, compelled. What'd they do?
Forced him. Made him feel like he had to.
Well, and I know, we all know he was, today we call it African American. He was black, okay? What we know. Sidney Poitier portrayed him in the greatest story ever told. Is what I did on research on this. Somebody elaborate pagan. They say, in my research, they say he was also a pagan. What are we talking about? Did that mean necessarily that he was a devil worshiper? I thought that was very interesting that they brought up, so I had to do a little studying because I always thought that was a idol worshiper, but really he just didn't adhere to the. Jay, what did you say?
I said he could have worshipped another deity.
Exactly, right. He didn't necessarily worship the God of Israel, is what my research said. So he was kind of a mutual, and maybe they looked on it. Why didn't they carry his cross? I want to ask y'all that question. Can anybody tell me that? That may be a stupid question, but I think it opens up the thought for discussion. They had physically beat him down so bad he couldn't do it. That I'm sure, from what I've studied, they'd already tried to work this out where he could, and the cross was so heavy, you can just sit there and beat somebody down. Well, you can just kill him right there, and you're not going to get to crucify him. They were bad hombres. So they saw him and said, you do it. You're going to do it. And you know he probably fell in line, and along the way I think he had compassion. Let's move on with 34. They gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink, but when he had tasted it, he wouldn't drink it. Now, in our other studies, it says this thing has been going on for 18 hours. That's some pretty good torture, isn't it? He hadn't had anything to drink or eat, probably. And I'm sure, I don't know, me, with my appetite, I'd probably be hungry, but.
That stuff was worse than not having anything to drink.
Okay. And they did that another thing to give him the worst thing they possibly could that wouldn't comfort him at all. All right, this next, then this is a shorter version. Then they crucified him and divided his garments. This is Matthew. There's other versions of this. And divided his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them for the clothing, and they casted lots. What are they talking about casting lots here? Exactly. Did you know I had somebody tell me, and I'm not being facetious. They said, now this is justifying. It's all right to gamble. I had somebody tell me that one time. I said, how did you? He said, well, they cast lots in front of the. I said, yeah, and look who was doing the casting of the lots.
It wasn't, I don't think it was always something bad, because if you remember when the disciples chose Matthias to replace Judas, they cast lots. So maybe it's like
A tradition.
well, it was some type of chance.
Okay, and you just made me think of something. Was this kind of like a souvenir to keep if you got it? Yeah, and that's probably why well, who's going to get this? Who's going to get that to say we did it? And maybe they're thinking one of these, I'm thinking out of the box totally, folks, so don't. Could have been. Absolutely. Okay, up over his head, the accusation written against him was this, and this is all in caps. This is Jesus, the King of Jews. But that was a facetious thing, right? That was he said he was, in my opinion. Is this? All right, let's move on. We've took one. That's a short synopsis of it. We're going to see a more of an illustration as we go to 180. I have picked Matthew on this one also, so we're continuing in verse 35. Let's start with 38. Then two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right, another on the left, and those who passed by blaspheming, wagging their heads and saying, "You who destroy the temple and built it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from that cross." Likewise, the chief priests also mocking with the scribes and the elders, and said, "He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we'll believe in him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will save him, for he said, I am the Son of God." 44 is the last verse of this reading. Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. So you got a lot going on here. You got people passing and just looking, and there he is laying there. So now let's talk about a timeline. I get this mixed up in my head, I'm not going to lie. How were their days broken up? Jay, I'm going to call on you for that.
There were 12-hour days, from sunup to sundown. And so, if you see, and I think the NIV actually uses our time. But for instance, in your next verse, I think it says the 6th hour.
Exactly. Now, as they went by and started mocking him, and everything's going pretty good, things are going to turn different. Some things that are unexplainable are going to happen. Let's go to John 19, 18 through 27. Here's another account. And then we're going to get into 3 hours on the cross. We're still in 180, and this is another account of it. John 19 and verse 18, where they crucified him, and the two others were with him, one on either side of him, and Jesus in the center. Now Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Then many of the Jews read this title, for the place was where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Therefore the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but he said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, what have I written? I have written. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and made to 4 parts, to each soldier a part, and also the tunic. Now the tunic was without seam, woven from the top in one place. They said, therefore, amongst themselves, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, whose it shall be. That's the scripture might be fulfilled. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Therefore the soldiers did these things. Now we're going to get into a different subject. There is a question of who was there at his crucifixion. Let's just keep on reading with John 25. I think this is an interesting account. Now there stood before the cross Jesus, his mother, and his mother's sister, and Mary, the wife of Clopas, who was in-laws there of that way, sister-in-laws or something I've read on, and Mary Magdalene. Has anybody ever done any research on Mary Magdalene? Exactly. And he healed her of them. And she had the means to help support his ministry, is what I read. Now she's standing there, and I'm not picking on her because I think this was destined. Do you think if she would have jumped up and said, he healed me, I'm evidence that he got these demons out of me? Does anybody see anywhere in the Bible that she said that? Would it have done any good if she had said it? None. They wasn't going to listen to her. They wasn't going to listen to her. Okay, I'm reading on in verse 26. I think, did I skip that? No, when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciples whom he loved standing by, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her to his home. That disciple was John. Anybody want to talk about that at all? I didn't know. I think he said at this point, John and Jesus, am I going over it's not mentioned here. She's seen enough. Take her and get her some comfort.
How old would she be back then? Because he was 33, and she was like 15 or 16, somewhere along there, real young.
Would she be 48 years old, 50? Now, see, that's some good research that I haven't done. I didn't know how old she was when she had him. So, okay. So it was there. Here I go. So this thing can go a lot of ways. What Joseph took him off the cross. There you go. Joseph of Arimathea got him off the cross. He got him down. All right, we've talked about that. We know she went home. Let's move on to Matthew 27. This is when, okay, he's laid there. People's mocked him. They've had they're all in this together. So, and Jay's mentioned the timeline to us and kept me straight with that. And I was straight with it, but I was still teeter-tottering about it. Jesus' last 3 hours on the cross. In chapter 27, verse 45. Now from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, so would that be noon to 3 o'clock? Is that right? Okay. From the 6th hour to the 9th hour until there was darkness all over the land. All right, that's in the middle of the day. What's going on here? Are we having an eclipse, or what do you think they started thinking about it? Anybody?
Folks that don't believe the Bible, don't believe God, say there's a problem.
You think the heckling stopped? Things got quiet? Some people said, uh-oh.
God showing his displeasure.
Does it anywhere depict what any of these rulers are doing at this time? I don't see it. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Did I pronounce that right? That is my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Now, people have said there's nobody that was more alone in the world than he at this point, or ever has been. Some of those who stood there when they heard that said, this man's calling for Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with sour wine and put it on a reed and offered it to him to drink. They're still offering that mess, aren't they, Mary? The rest said, let him alone. Let us see if Eli will come and save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. In other words, at this point, he's died. Is the way I hear that. All right, we're kind of repeating things, but we're going to move on to verse 51 through 56, another account. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top. It was torn in two from top to the bottom. And the earth quaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves, after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, truly, this was the Son of God. And many women who followed Jesus from Galilee ministering him were looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Hoseas. Is that the way you pronounce that? That's the best I can do with the J is H. and the mother of Zebedee's son. Okay, Mary, this is, at this time, has John taken Mary home with him? Got her out of the way? So but they're convinced of this now. So then we move on from there. All the other counts in the Gospels are about the same. We're moving on to 183, the burial of Jesus. Now we get into Joseph Arimathea. Anybody want to mention anything at this point?
You know, what I see is interesting here in verse 53,
Let me turn with you there. Go ahead.
where it says that, and coming out of the tomb after his resurrection.
That's a good point.
He went into the holy city, and he hadn't been raised at this time.
No, he hadn't. Let me look at that. If you'll give me just a second, Kenneth.
It starts back at 52, when the tomb was opened.
You would have thought that would have caused a lot of people to believe. I guess it didn't.
No. They were scared, but after it, okay, here we go. Matthew describes a specific event following Jesus' resurrection. The resurrected saints, whose bodies have been raised earlier, went into the holy city, Jerusalem, and appeared to many. This verse is often seen as a symbolic representation of the power of Christ's resurrection and the dawn of a new age. That still don't handle the chronological events there, does it? Kind of seems like the cart is put before the horse there, to me.
It was something to introduce the Christian age.
It was. He hasn't come back for his 40 days on earth, it says in this curriculum. And of course, we all know he came back. But this did start the New Testament church, basically. Acts 2, it officially starts, but this is a foreshadowing of it. Any other comment on that?
The amazing thing to me is they had to go back to their graves. They were raised, but they had to go back.
How weird was that?
They couldn't stay out.
Because that only happens in the second coming, am I right? All right. You're getting into a lot of stuff. Let's go to 184. Moving on with this. The tomb watched and guarded. How do you think, what's the mood of Pilate and all these other people with this going on?
Ignorance.
Were they scared? Were they concerned?
There was suspicion.
There had to be, didn't there?
There was suspicious of disciples of Jesus.
In my thoughts, they'd already seen Lazarus raised from the dead, and now some other people were coming back from the dead.
Continued unbelief.
Kind of looks back like to Pharaoh, don't it? He lost a son and still. Okay. In verse 61, it says, and Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary sitting opposite of the tomb. Pilate sets a guard. On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chiefs, priests, and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate. Okay. Are these the chief priests, are these the same people that tried Jesus? Chief priest? I'm just asking. It would be, wouldn't it? I see them as in that praetorium or that hallway, and they're getting their heads together here and saying, "Sir, we remember while he was still alive how the deceiver said, after 3 days, I'll rise. So, they're thinking, man, I'll tell you what. Therefore, command that the tomb be made secure until that third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say to the people, he has risen from the dead. So the last deception will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, have you a guard? Get out, go your way and make it as secure as you know how. Get out of here, go do that. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard.
Well, they can see here that his word has been fulfilled all the way, and they said it
This is coming next.
again, so they wanted to kind of stop.
It goes back to Tom too. They still don't believe. They could have acquiesced and said, okay,
Basically calling it a deception.
so they're going to actually physically think that they can stop this after this earthquake and these people coming out of the grave, and they still think they can humanly stop him from coming out of there. So that's where we're at on this. And we go to 66 and we know what happened. So in Matthew 28, 1 through 8, we're going to go there. We're going into part 4 of your curriculum. The tomb was visited by women and found empty. We're going into the same chapter as the Great Commission. So everything's starting to unfold in this thing. Now, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning, and his clothing was as white as snow. And the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. They froze, is the way I see that. But the angel answered and said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, and he has said, come see the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And indeed, he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you. So they went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy at the same time, and ran to bring his disciples word. Any comment on that? Basically, it's just unfolding. Things are happening. Pretty much in order the way they said it was going to. 186 in our curriculum, the tomb found empty, Luke 24 and 12. Pretty simple. Pretty straightforward.
There's only a few of the same people following him in everything.
Just like it was before. That's a good observation. Very good. Peter arose and
Thomas wasn't the only one that had doubts. They all had doubts.
we're fixing to come up on a time where you're going to, see that. They all had, so you're saying, well, Tom's making another interesting observation. Even his own people had doubts. Even his own followers of the 12 had doubts.
Even these women,
Had doubts.
they still expected to see his body there.
They did. They were still mourning, were they not? They didn't know all this.
Said he wasn't going to be there. They expected him to be there.
Exactly. So, acquiring faith, everything in this Bible is telling us how tough it is to be faithful and to do that. Okay, Luke 24 and 12, then Peter arose and ran into the sepulchre, and stooping down, he beheld the linen clothes laid by themselves, and departed, wondering in himself at that which was come to pass. So Peter was shocked too, wasn't he? Couldn't believe it. All right, we're going to have the first appearance of him. So let's go to Mark 16, 9 through 11, as it's unfolding. Now when he had arose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him as they mourned and wept. Let me make sure I got this as they reading all of this. Okay, one more verse. And when they heard that he was alive and they had been seen by her, they did not believe. So we talked, there it is again. So Tom must have knew exactly by heart what these verses, they did not believe. I want to switch gears and go back, as James tried to. And I'm talking to me right now. When we come together on the first day of the week, I think these verses, this story, helps us to look back and know what he gave for us as we take the Lord's Supper. And know if this is this bad a deal, according to in Acts 20 and verse 7 through this study goes with it. And a lot of people don't believe that you have to or whatever, but doing it more often and going back and looking at this story weekly keeps you more in touch with what he gave for us, what he went through.
It helps our unbelief.
It does. It's the last college class I took was in 2010, and it called it threading. I think it's the memorial we do every Sunday threads our belief. It keeps us threaded all together of what he gave up for us. And I think it all fits together.
And that's the way he set it up, is for us to do it weekly,
Exactly.
not annually, every 6 months, 3 months. It's every Sunday.
And I'm not here to run anybody down. I'm not. I'm here to do what he's instructed me to do. That's it. Nothing else. And it's pretty plain. When do you raise? On the first day of the week. How many first day of the weeks are there? There's 52 weeks in a year, and we're here every first day of the week. Why wouldn't we remember? Why wouldn't that be, a fancy word today would be the linchpin or whatever it is, the thing that drives it and has us here every first day of the week. And we ought to be able to tell others why we do what we do. And this is a perfect example of that. Okay, I've lost my place, but I'm going to go back. Now, I'm out of the King James Version. You reading the. Now, when Jesus had risen early the first day of the week, first he appeared to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils, and she went and told the others. That's a repeat. Okay, why do you think he appeared to her first? Is there any meaning in that? Is there, or it just happened to be? I don't think there is, but it's really, on a personal note, he did a lot for her.
I think everything she was doing for him, that was her way of thanking him for what he did for her.
There it is.
He loved her, she loved him, he loved her.
And I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole. I guess I will go there. But that's, people today actually believe you can be possessed. And I guess you can, of living a rebellious life according to what Jesus wants you to believe. And there's been a lot of stories, and I've read a few books about demon possession. And she was truly glad that he healed her of these demons.
And God is no respecter of persons. He loves us all.
That's true. Okay, we're moving on to 188. He appears to other women. That's Matthew 28, which we're going to be covering a lot of that chapter in the end of this study. Starting in verse 9. We will stop here, but we're going to read this first. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, Rejoice. So they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. So he's getting the word out. And that is 188. And with that bell, we're going to start, and I guess that will be on May the 4th. I will be back, and we will start, and I'm going to write that down because that's when I'm coming back, and we will finish this study. And the class across the hallway is going into Romans today, and that's what we're going to study next. That'll be a summer study, I'm sure, as we go on, but we will be starting in 189. And he appealed to all of them. And we don't have much left of this study. We should finish it up on, I think it's May the 4th, if that's on a Sunday. And we'll be done with this study. Thank you for all your attention today.